Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Give me just 1 second, guys. My audio is not behaving itself. Okay, let's see if that works. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's go. Um, I had a test. I had a test stream open on one of my computers, and so every 10 seconds I was hearing myself talk from one of my mini computers. It was rather disorienting, and then I was like, well, which one is it coming from? So got to rotate through them and just start closing Chrome windows. All right. I don't think this is going to be a very gentle session based on the last couple days. And the NASDAQ just seems pretty hell-bent on doing 700 to 1100 point sessions. Makes managing risk super difficult. Um, there's also, we have jolts at 9 a.m. Central. So not only will I probably not be touching this before the opening range gets set, but probably unlikely to touch it in the moments afterward. Oh yeah, I guess I should tell people in the Discord that we're live. All right. Already solid 170 points opening range on the NASDAQ. Mm, liquidity looks okay, but obviously super fast. So, what am I looking for today's session? The first thing I'm looking for is to touch this with a lot of care because when our opening range, our 5 minute opening range is 200 points. Managing risk, even with M and Q, is going to be something to consider. I think um, I think it's probably going to want a 50 to 70 point stop. And typically, when I trade M and Q, I'm usually using like a 25, maybe a 40 point stop. But I don't think that that's going to fly right now. So, looking at a higher time frame, these are weekly volume profiles. We're obviously trading basically right at the edge of value after that little bounce we just rejected out of value. Um, Kind of just been rotating in this area. Had two rejections out the top side of value. That's what these white lines extended are. Um, but in terms of what I'm looking for today, honestly, this is like one, two, three. This is like the fourth test of this level down here. If sellers can't break it, my guess would be we head back towards these wicks at like 29,868. Um, but I also think there's a chance that we just like, I mean, this is all value, and point of control for this week is like 29,755. So, um, I think there's a chance that we, until Jolts comes out in like 20 minutes, they're probably just going to sit here and rotate inside of a tight, relatively speaking, tight, violent range. I have a 500 volume chart up, so this is not it's not a linear time frame. It is simply every time 500 contracts are traded, it makes a new candle. So you can kind of judge how much volume we're doing. Also, all of our order flow studies react a lot better on volume candles. They're not time based. Um, so, and it also gives me an idea of like how much volume we're trading, you know? So like if anybody tuned in to the Juneteenth um, session that we did last week, that was just like a kind of a tech, uh, figure out our tech situation. Um, you could see that there was like, a third as many candles as there are right now. And the fatter lines here are marking the edge of value. This is just a normal, this is just like Motive Wave's default volume profile. And I just distinguish them because we have these smaller dashed lines like here and here and here, which I'm actually going to bump up the line width so they're a little easier for everyone to see. So these dashed lines are from our impact study that's looking for abnormally large executed trades. This is like they've been the weirdest pattern. So this was like the sell-off on the 23rd, and then there was Micron earnings after hours, and we just rocket shipped, and then drifted in Globex, and then dumped at the open, tried to rally, and then sold off again during Globex. So, um, as I've said on stream before, like I don't really follow. I follow market news. Obviously, I'm as plugged in as anybody else is, but I don't trade. I don't trade off of news, so I don't have like a news feed or anything like that. But um, you know, I read Twitter like the rest of us, and um, I think there was quite a bit of volatility coming out of the Korean stock market again last night. So, um, how much of what we're seeing here is related to that? It's hard to know, but and I think the main reason that, like I don't follow news is because I find that the market doesn't really follow news, not in a way that like a normal regular human can like actually like react to it. Um, Sometimes you'll get what looks to be you'll perceive as bad news, and you know the market will go up. So I just prefer to not pay attention to it in that way when it comes related to trading, and instead um, will really only read it, have some awareness to it, but ultimately kind of let the market show me what it wants to do. If it wants to go bid off of bad news, then who am I to say otherwise? But I do think that this ultimately just wants to like rotate in place here until we get set. I mean, I think with how many times we've tested this level down here, one, two, three, and now kind of four, if you count this little mini bounce. I think that the onus is on the buyers to get it back up off of here. I think the sellers have a little bit of an edge down here. Um, but I don't think anybody with size is going to want to push it down and try to actually break this low meaningfully if we have data coming in 15 minutes, because it's jolts and it's also ISM, it's also manufacturing data. So um, there's some nice holds down here of um, this impact level from our impact study overnight. So somebody sold a bunch of contracts down here into the bid, and then the bubbles are kind of um, false breakdown or false breakout, in this case, false breakdown detector. So that is basically looking for when order flow is not supportive of a given low. And then we kind of like look at the entire session as a whole and rank how strong that false breakdown is. And if it's strong enough, then we flag it. And if it's not, then we don't. I'm going to actually switch this to use RTH only. So you'll see we just have one here right around the open. It's good for a little bit of a pop. One of the people that I learned trading futures from used to talk about a running start, which was like the market's kind of uncanny ability to like test a level, test a level, test a level and fail and then rally really hard and then come screaming back down. That's kind of my thought with what this is doing right now. Like we're just dancing on top of this level, and I'm wondering if we get just a little bit of a pop to come up here in this area, like around 29,600, and then come back down to the downside. That would be, I think, not unsurprising with the data to watch us pop on the data and then come back down to the downside. So none of, I'm laughing at chat. Whenever you're starting a stream and you ask your friends to come, they are good friends if they come and ask questions in your chat. A bid is the thing that you would very much like to have right now because I know that you want to be long. We have a bid. We have a bid here and no bid up here. Wow. I was expecting a choppy open because we know that there's data coming, but ooh. Really like a pretty clean Globex session. And I find that sometimes a clean Globex session lends itself to a messy RTH session. But we had exhaustion up here. That's what the little yellow octagon was, and it was actually right at the same place that we got exhaustion at the end of RTH yesterday's session. And then we got exhaustion here, the start of Globex, sold off, got exhaustion down here. Nice little like offside seller down here. We also saw there was a failed breakdown that we detected over here. And then got a nice pop. And now we have drifted back into chop. Also, YouTube is telling me that my connection is poor, which is shocking because I have uh, extremely fast internet. If you're watching, tell me in the chat if the stream doesn't look high quality, and I'll restart the stream, or I'll restart my equipment, I should say. I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to do that right now. Be right back. Okay, we went from a poor connection to an excellent connection, is what YouTube told me. So this is about as choppy as it could possibly get. It's like these rotations look tiny, but that's like 258. It's like 100 point, sort of like 100 to 120 point sort of ping pong going on right now. So that is definitely take your money mode. And it likes to lure you in to be like, oh, if you had just shorted here and longed here, you could probably be done for the day. But All right, we have data in 4 minutes as this makes a new high or new RTH high. Either we're either we're leaking data or this isn't one of those fun market behaviors, which is like to just run everybody's stops right before the data drops. Can it stay bid? Probably for like another like 2.5 minutes until my data feed freezes whenever ISM and JOLTS comes out. This is going to come up right up to the edge of value, 474, if you're using the composite from the overnight. All right, 1 minute until data drop. If you happen to be in position right now, just know that it's probably going to get very whippy here in about 15 to 20 seconds. Wow, that is very delayed. Oh, there we go. Somebody was late. I'm going to go right to NQ's midline here. I'm going to give this probably at least 5 minutes to settle in. I'm kind of interested to see what it does if it tests up here. Um, I'm looking at our higher time frame. We're just like probably want to like this is like if you're to me like if you have an upside target here on NQ, you're looking at like 29,750. It's like another like 250 points up, which is like back up to the weekly point of control. And they're pretty close to this level here, which is 29,570. But right now, just hanging out right on the outside edge of value. That was a tag of the mid on NQ. If we get kind of like a, if we get a delta rotation, if we flip from do our best to keep the bid. If we start to get a delta color change here, somewhere between here and here, this is like edge of value for this session, the mid for the session, and then this uh, large trade level from impact overnight. I'm like interested in potentially taking a short trade. Target would be back down to like 29 330-ish. Back to the composite point of control on NQ. But right now, buyers, I would say buyers in control, but buyers in a spot that they don't want to hang out in for too long, in my opinion. But I needed to see something kind of actionable, whether sellers can get back in control, which would bring about the yellow candle color. Um, an exhaustion marker, something to tell me that, we're not going to just keep going straight up. I'm not super duper interested in longs. Probably if I was going to look at a long trade, it would be getting back above this impact level and then coming back down to test and hold it. But to me, this is kind of where buyers need to win. Need to get it over this spot here. But right now, just kind of trading right at the mid. They're going to come up and test that level. Looks like. Yeah, we've settled in enough to take a trade. I just not taking any trades in this particular area. I'm interested to see what the reaction is to this spot from the overnight. You know, this reaction here, which didn't like tag the level exactly, might have already been the first reaction there. But now that we've touched it, if we can get some selling pressure, I might be interested in that short trade, but not while buyers are still in control here. It was probably a pretty decent scalp off of that level already. I'm gonna come test it again. No, I don't even have my DOM in the spot where all of this is going on because I find that if I watch the DOM, it makes me start. Like if I watch the DOM in a place that I really don't want to be taking a trade right now, then I think the monkey brain kind of takes over and makes you more likely to take a trade. So if we roll over, then I'll move my, I'll move my DOM up to actually watch what's going on. But since I'm not really looking to take a trade right now, I don't tend to watch because it's just a bunch of noise and will lure me into touching things that I probably shouldn't touch. So you get some reactions from this level, but nothing that sellers are like, you're mostly getting just small pullbacks. You're not really getting any aggressive selling here, which probably lends itself to more upside. Notice that this actual move started like 3 minutes or 4 minutes before the data actually dropped. So I'm not going to say that people know the data ahead of time, but numbers don't lie. Still struggling with this level, but still don't have enough sell volume to actually roll this over. That might be the start of something though. All right, there's some selling pressure coming in. Not super strong though. Buyers just grabbed it back. Nothing is going to be easy, in my opinion, today. Like, it's so rangy. Gonna come test this level again. Now they're above it. Well, for how I trade, which is looking for, reactions in certain places, so far we went sideways for 30 minutes, and now we've just gone straight up for 15 minutes with one very small pullback. So you're welcome for keeping the bid. I almost put on a short trade down here too, which, you know, would have sent it to the moon. Still struggling in this area. They haven't really firmly broke this level, but it's still making new highs or new RTH highs, so I don't feel like stepping in front of that. So just glancing at I have my phone down here, but I'm looking at just a composite or like all the different futures assets, kind of like where everything is at. So the Nasdaq is down like 0.5% right now. Um, ES is exactly break even, and the Dow is basically exactly break even. So, and Bitcoin is still below 60K, but not by very much. I mean, we're just kind of up in space here. From a seller's perspective, they have a chance of putting in, well, until they lost this. Technically speaking, you could put in a lower high based on this, but there's not really any selling pressure to speak of at the moment. So um, that's a little bit better. All right, and we're short at 544. My stop is going to be all the way up at 594. Let's give it 50 points. First target, going to look for, looking for like 100 points down. So we're going to look for these tops right here and a little dip back into the opening range. Basically looking for this to reoffer again and out of value to reoffer again. But if they get it back up this close to the RTH high, I think they'll probably just, I think they'll break it and probably send it higher. So I don't want my stop any further. But based on the volatility, I think 50 points on here is probably warranted. It was a pretty fast buying reaction off the mid. We don't particularly like that while we're short, but oh, that's probably going to stop me. Sure enough. And that's the reason that I didn't put my stop any higher. That looked a little bit headline news like. Um, but I got to take that trade. You know, we were already looking for selling pressure in that particular area and from this overnight level. And so we got above it and then got back below it. Sellers got a little bit of control here. So I think that was worth the risk there. Also, my suspicion of not putting my stop any higher was definitely warranted. This is like a little bit of a, there was some weakness at the very end of that move there, which they're pulling back from. But these are also based on order of magnitude. So like this one here isn't as strong as the one down here. So I don't know that I care too much about that one. And now I think it looks like the trade of like going towards the point of control, which is at 750 on NQ. Looks like it's probably the one that wants to try to play out. But maybe they just had to get my stop first. If they get it back down here again and we get selling pressure again, I might just take the same trade again. This is only our second stream. I did a couple of internal ones to make sure that, all of our equipment was working properly and audio and all of that stuff. And then we did Juneteenth last week. But the 2 sessions that I did internally, I was positive both of those sessions. So I think it's like a christening for the first live YouTube session to take the first trade right between the eyes. Here we go again. Not until they get it below. I'm actually going to scroll my DOM down. Not until they get it down into the 60s again. We'll be here till about 10 a.m. Central Time, so like another 30 minutes or so. Um, that was taking the one trade, but I was probably a little short biased coming in here, opening up around, around the weekly low. Sat on hands during the pre-data chop, and then before the data even arrived, we started to rally, and then rallied more on data, little micro pullback from like 593 to like 525, and now we're up above the level that I was interested in, looking for a reoffer. So because my initial bias was looking for a reoffer, for me personally, it makes it hard for me to get into a long trade. I just find it like, I don't know if maybe a little bit overstated, but psychologically distressing to, like, if I try to get long here and then it actually rolls over, then I would almost rather just sit on my hands and wait for the trade I want to see rather than, um, force myself into a long trade. Nice to see some familiar faces in here. Hi, guys. Yeah, the danger for sellers right now is that as they start to fill out the whole session's volume profile, this starts to look fairly flat, like overall. Like you don't, down here you have this low volume node that's kind of created here. I'll just move my mouse so it's not there, but like you have this created here. But this is kind of just like flat, 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 flat until like 700. So um, the risk with flat profiles is one, you don't really know where it wants to try to hold, and it tends to sort of like move through those areas. Um, because there's just not much structure there anymore. Like we've traded through it too many times in the overnight session and now sort of like chopping through it during RTH right now. But since we had this pop before the early data, it's been a pretty one-sided auction. And this was a pretty nice hold on the edge of value and um, and the mid for the overall session. They didn't get it super far here though. They popped it and now they're kind of sitting here struggling. It's starting to get a little bit of selling pressure again. But now they're holding it above this level from the overnight. They just basically tagged it and popped it. Also, if you're like, I don't know, if this happened to be your first trading week, just know that this is incredibly fast and rangy movement, even for people that have been doing it a long time. Like if I wasn't live streaming, I might look at how fast and how rangy this is and take my Friday off. But instead, I'm here with you lovely people. Seller's trying a little something, but it's not very strong. And when I say not very strong, I'm like looking at the candle coloring, which is a composite of price action, delta, and volume. Um, so if it's sort of grayish, it means that neither side really has an edge right now from that perspective. But it keeps me from having to read the DOM volume down here and candles. Here we go again. All right. Okay. That's better from a sell perspective. Gonna take the same trade again. Okay. All right. We're in at 49.25. And stop is gonna be 95 back above where that transition happened. There's a very good chance they could hold this again, but they're showing me selling in the area that I want to see selling, so I have to take it. Also, it's just getting abundantly choppy up here. And that's a second stop trying that. Yeah, this is a pretty um, like it's tricky. It's tricky because, I was looking at this particular area before we opened and wanted to see selling pressure, and you know, twice we've seen selling pressure there. So woe is me to try to take this a third time, but I think the risk to reward makes sense. Because I think we have a chance of falling back through this low volume node and back to the point of control down here. But all right. All right. Last try here, and then we'll say this idea is not so viable. We're short at 58.75. Stop is at 98. Looking for close down to here. I'll probably trail my stop if we're able to actually get into profit. And this is kind of the spot that sellers need to get through. If we get below 500, I'll probably move my stop to break even. But until then, I've got to give it enough room to work. I'd probably be more confident in this trade if I hadn't been stopped out on it twice. But let's see. They're holding right at the session mid right now. All right, there's 500. All right, I'm going to put my stop in profit here. We'll go to back above 50. I'm canceling the upper stop. Opening range high is like 64 on NQ, 464. That'd be our first look there for buyers potentially losing a level they want. There we go. There we go. Gonna try at 500. Need to get into this low volume node. That's where I want them to get into. It's better. Gonna move stop down again. Stop is gonna go to 35. Trailing this further, we're going to 500. And I'm going to put my ultimate my bid to get either my stop or down here at 447, right below the opening range low on NQ. I'm looking at these tops back here. Looks like they want my stop at 500. All right. Nice scalp. Was hoping that we would go a little further, but basically had opening range high and these like two little pop tops from the overnight. So so got the trade that I wanted, but took 2 hits first. So just a little bit worse than break even after those. And it's all the way back up to where I was short. Always feel justified when I take profit. Sometimes I am guilty of moving my stop into profit or to break even too quickly and then getting wicked out before it actually moves. But in this case, I feel quite justified. That's a nice rebid off of the opening range high there. Like that's about as clean as it's going to get. But just noticing, at least for the moment, that the candle color hasn't rotated back over. So sellers with at least more volume and negative delta than the buyers at the moment. There's a big offer at 500 there. Buyers gobbled it right up. I'm a little bit less interested in taking this trade again after they held the opening range high so cleanly. But what sellers do have going for them is they just put in a little bit of a lower high right there. 53, basically almost where I was short the first time, or the third time, I should say. And I try not to take too many trades after, at least for the morning session, after 10 a.m. Central, which is like another 15 minutes or so. And this type of volatility is like, you know, why, why I don't always love to trade when this is happening, because right idea twice and just it's so rangy that, like, maybe in a normal environment, my stop would have been like somewhere closer to like above this pivot, but that's like right now, it's like 130 points. So maybe it ends up ultimately being the same if you get stopped out a couple of times, but let's see where we're at, what this looks like. It's kind of becoming a nasty 30-minute candle. Basically grabbed liquidity over the top of this pivot in the overnight, and sellers getting pretty aggressive there over 29,500. But breaking the opening range high and then holding it on a retest is not bearish. So while the candle coloring is still firmly in the hands of the sellers, I would be cautious after that hold. And I'm using the 30-minute opening range. I know there's lots of different ones, but I learned on the 30-minute opening range, so it is embedded in my brain forever now. And buyers Buyer's struggling to get this back out of value here. Edge of value from the overnight session is like 529, 540. Yeah, right now they held basically right in the middle of this low volume node. There comes some buyers stepping in. I mean, that's already a really nice trade off the opening range high. If anybody took that, that's almost 100 points right there. Buyers trying to grab the ball back there. Got rejected there over 550. Yeah, I mean, the opening range high is like a place that definitely had a chance to hold. Um, but I was obviously hoping for lower. You know, I thought maybe we just shot through it and then this becomes the point of control for the whole session down at 325 becomes kind of a magnet. But I feel pretty good about protecting profit there on the way down. It's like two small losers and one decent winner, so just barely worse than break even after that sequence. It's a tricky, tricky week. I mean, these two moves here, this was in the after hours, and then this was yesterday's RTH open. And I mean, that's just brutal. You know, and on the week, you're looking at like, call it 3,100, 30, yeah, almost 31,000 to almost 29,000. So you're looking at a 2,000 point range for the week. makes it very hard to manage risk at an intraday level. Like you can be right, as you saw I was in terms of direction, and still get stopped out multiple times just because the volatility is so great. Now just getting choppy again. And I think stop has to be like over 580. So once again, if you're getting short here, an 80-point stop is pretty hefty for how I like to trade. But it's also something that might be necessary in this volatility. So widen stop and widen targets, or if you happen to be trading multiple contracts, then, size down. Because what people don't tend to consider, especially if you're on the newer side, is if you're used to trading 2 or 3 contracts and then you see this thing moving around this much, you start getting dollar signs in your eyes thinking about how much money you can make. But if you're still using the same stop that you use for 2 to 3 contracts, you're probably going to be in for a bad time. Better off shaving off one of those contracts and widening your stop a little bit, because you're going to get, if you're right, you're going to get just as many points, you know? So, like, risk is relative to the overall movement of the market. Like, yes, I typically use a 20 to 40 point stop on NQ, but right now we're doing 20 to 40 point 500 vol candles. So even here, I was using a 50-point stop each one of these times. I think 50 and then like a 45-point stop the second time. And I got effectively wicked out twice. My stop probably should have been more like 60 or 70 points. And even then, I think it probably would have got me. It was like short at like 540 and it got above 600 again. So, in my opinion, when it's trading the way that it's trading, like you have to respect the volatility. Um, Capital protection, you know, not over trading. Like 3 times is my limit, in here. Had I gotten stopped a third time, you know, typically for me, that's like the end of my trading day is like 3 strikes. Um, Now I took 3 trades total. 1 worked, 1 didn't. That's a nice hold off the opening range high again. So, man, that's just an instant bid off of that level. Like if we zoom in, this candle here, because these are not linear time based, 55, 9:55 and 44 seconds. Yeah, like held out there for like 45 seconds to a minute. And this is just like no direction. Now you're getting, sellers got in control, buyers tried to grab it, sellers got it back. Most of the candles are just kind of grayish in here, trading right at the edge of value, trading right at the session mid. The person that I learned from used to talk about the mid as like a football field. So like whichever side we're trading on is kind of like over the 50-yard line. But right now we're trading at the 50-yard line repetitively. We've been rotating over it for like now for the past hour almost. And something else that I think about is we have had some absolutely insane moves, as we've already talked about this week. And so I think there's sometimes that, the market just like participants just get tired, you know? Like we've moved up and down so much, so many times that I think at a certain point you start to get less participation, which like thins out the depth of market, liquidity gets thinner, you get jumpier moves, and we don't necessarily have the big volume to like move this thing around a bunch. So I think we're just kind of balancing here, kind of filling out this. If we zoom out even further, like looking into next week, this whole area from the week of June 10th is like balance all the way from, 29, 645. Interestingly enough, if you were to extend this line across, that's exactly where we rejected this morning. So I know some people in the Discord use the overlapping value areas as pretty decent this morning, but does get tricky because you also have basically the point of control from this week right in here. So it's just a bunch of chop. Also wanted to look at this. This is kind of an experimental study that we have that's looking for low volume nodes. So it's like actually kind of like the reverse, like a reverse volume profile. But we haven't worked out all the kinks from it yet. So I just glance at it from time to time to see if it's behaving itself. So pretty wicky 30-minute candle there, which also means that it's about 10 o'clock. So I think that's probably going to be it for me, guys. I'm going to end up just a little bit worse than break even. Nothing too exciting. We're sitting here at neutral delta. I have a feeling it stays pretty choppy, but wouldn't be surprised to go get breakfast and come back and see this down here at back down at the point of control for the session. But good luck to the rest of you that are still trading. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back at the same time again next week. Cheers.